Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Audit and Governance Committee on Monday, 15th of April. I'm Richard Biggs. I represent Dorchester Poundbury Ward. And welcome to everyone who's watching online. Mr. House-Seek from Deloitte, you're on there. Welcome. And we're very thin on the ground in terms of councillors today, but we are quorate. And I think for future meetings, whoever's running those really needs to make sure that there's better member attendance. We've got one more joining us, so that's good. So usual rules apply. Please keep your mobile phones on silent and silence your laptops, please, so we don't get too many interruptions. And if you could just introduce yourself the first time you speak, that would be really helpful for people watching. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the minutes from the previous meeting, which was held on the 25th of March. I hope you've had the time to read all of those. I will ask one question of Mr. Dunn, and that's on page 6. The Executive Director for Corporate Development confirmed that he would create an indicative costing for the committee to aid understanding. This was around the Code of Conduct hearings subcommittees and what the cost, and I think that refers to Councillor Christopher's question. I wonder if you were able to come back to us, please.
Thanks. Good morning, Aidan Dunn, Executive Director for Corporate Development. Yes, this is an action raised last time when myself and the monitoring officer are having conversations about trying to come up with an indicative costing. Of course, each investigation would be different. So we haven't completed that action yet, but we'll circulate it to the committee once we have.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, I'm moving on. I have no points. Okay, are we happy to accept those minutes? I'm not seeing anyone against. Okay, thank you. Right, the next item on the agenda is item 4, isn't it? No, declaration. Hold on, let's get back to my agenda. Let's see what it is. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members present or co-opted members? No, not seeing any. Item 4, public participation. Do we have any questions received? John, Susan? No? Nope. Okay. Okay, so there's been no questions from the members of the public for what is the last meeting of Audit and Governance of this political cycle. So that we will now move to the annual governance statement. Sorry, we haven't done apologies. I'm really getting ahead of myself, aren't we? I think we may have a long list of apologies.
An apology for absence was received from Councillor Gorringe. Thank you.
Right, so we have a number of councillors who've not given their apologies, which is really not acceptable. We do need this to be, perhaps group leaders need to really get a grip on this in future. I know it's election time, people are very busy, but this is a really important committee for the council. Yes, Belinda Borden is online apparently. Just been reminded. Yes, I can see you there. So welcome, Belinda. I believe she's not too well at the moment, so she's not joining us. So apologies, take you out of that slight comment. Okay, so I believe we can now finally go to the annual governance statement, and Mark Eyre, I think, is poised to take us through the paper. I hope you've all had a chance to look at it. I've got some comments, but I'm sure you want to give us a brief introduction, please.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, committee. So I'm Mark Eyre, and I'm the Service Manager for Assurance. So just to give a little introduction to the paper, for those that aren't aware, the annual governance statement is a statutory document, and it accompanies the annual accounts, setting out an assurance that our governance arrangements are fit for purpose. And in doing so, it identifies any areas for improvement. It's based on SIP for guidance, and each year is signed off by the leader and the chief executive. The statement looks back on the previous 12 months, so it's covering the period 1st of April 2023 through to 31st of March 2024, and the document consists of the statement itself, but is then supported by a local code of corporate governance. So going back 12 months, and I think possibly even the 12 months prior to that, we had a challenge from the committee to try and look at the format of the statement, see if we could make it a little bit easier on the eye. This is the first draft in that new format, and I'd certainly welcome the committee's thoughts on the approach that we've taken. I appreciate that there's still some work to do to make some of the wording an easier read, and I know the Chair and Vice Chair sort of previously have mentioned to me that perhaps some of the risk updates in there, which are lifted from the risk register, are a bit wordy for public-facing documents. So we'll have a look at that a bit further, but certainly we'll welcome any comments in that respect. For each of the 7 themes that are included within the document, we've identified any areas of improvement, as well as providing a brief update on any actions that were taken since last year's statement. And you'll also see this time round, we've included hyperlinks to the various documents that have been referenced. The content of the statement and the identified areas of improvement have been driven by the supporting local code of corporate governance. And within that document, again, there's the 7 themes, and each of those have nominated officer leads. And those officer leads have assisted with actually providing that level of evidence, really to sort of demonstrate how we're supporting each of the criteria contained within. In addition to the theme leads, I've also provided our senior leadership team with the opportunity to review and comment on that statement. So other than that, probably not too much to add at this stage, but it is the committee's first opportunity to see the statement and to influence it. In past years, comments have been fed back from the committee, and we've reflected those back into the revised statement. And I think on one occasion at least, we've come back with a refined document to this committee ahead of publication with the annual accounts. So if I'll stop talking there and open up for any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Mr. Roach.
Hello, Simon Roach, Co-operative member. Thank you very much for that introduction and for the documents. I thought the slides and the associated text were really helpful, actually, in terms of understanding how the principles are applied. I have a comment there and a couple of questions. The comment is that if I look at the detailed textual document, there are some areas of improvement that are included in the slides that are missing in sections A, B, and G. So we should be making sure those are consistent, please. And then the questions are, one is there's a hyperlink to some information about equality, diversity, and inclusion. That's referenced in the slides, I think. And the hyperlink talks about a 2-year plan operating from 21 to 22, and the strategy was last reviewed in 21 with the next update expected March of 24. So my question is, it's not really clear if that plan was fully executed to completion and there's nothing else to do, or whether it's waiting to be updated because there's still more work to do on equality, diversity, and inclusion. Either way, I think the reference is not helpful because it refers to something that's obviously historic and doesn't really reflect the true current state. So I wonder if you could just clarify on equality, diversity, and inclusion what the true status is of that plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Roach. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure off the top of my head unless other colleagues are. Okay, thank you.
Morning. So from an equality, diversity and inclusion perspective, we have got a draft refreshed plan. We got it, it was taken it was going to be taken to an overview committee a couple of months ago, but at that particular stage, the Government Department for Education was under consultation around one particular matter around transgender issues. So we're awaiting the outcome of the national policy. Then we're going to update our local policy and plan, take it to an overview committee, and then take it forward. So I think from your point, but we have still got a long way to go in terms of equality, diversity, and inclusion. It's one of those things that it's never complete. So it's very much on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. The second question I had was about the major risks. So, although I think they're extreme risks, actually, and they are referenced. There's one around high needs block, one around business continuity, and one around cyber attack. The one related to, if I can just pull up the document, the one related to the loss of ICT service through cyber attack. What are we doing? It says the implementation of vulnerability management technologies has reduced by 82% since the introduction of vulnerability management technology. I would suggest that's a completely nonsensical statement because it's sort of self-referring and it doesn't actually tell you anything. I could obviously ask questions about that, but I think my general question around these extreme risks are actually, it's important, I think, for the Audit and Governance Committee to truly understand what these extreme risks actually are, properly understand what they are. And some of the language here, I think, doesn't help us to understand what they are and what's been done about them. So I wonder if I could request, Mr. Chairman, that we have an item whereby the owners of these extreme risks come to the committee and actually explain in language that we can understand what the risks actually are and what the strategy or action plan is to properly address them, please. Thank you.
I take that, Mr. Roach, absolutely. I mean, 4 members have been on this committee for a while. We've had those presentations previously. In fact, I actually went on a cyber conference to really get to grips with understanding that risk and come back and challenge the owners of that risk, you know, with a private meeting. But I think certainly for the next audit committee and the new members, absolutely, these are the top risks. They need to understand them. And I absolutely take your point on those wording. I found them completely nonsensical. They were a cut and paste. Even so, if they're cut and paste, they shouldn't be in the risk register because they don't make sense. But this is the front page for the public, really, into our governance arrangements. So, you know, saying high needs block, which probably won't mean anything to the general public. You know, the wording around the ICT, mention of LGR, people won't know, you know, acronyms, what that means. So the rest of the document is a lot better than it has been in the past. I think it's really good, but I think the risk, you know, and I literally put some of those into artificial intelligence, you know, it came out with some really good user-friendly wordings of what, you know, tools to use for ICT, you know, and it just made sense. And I thought, well, that's just what we need to do on there and make them accessible to everyone, really. I believe, Councillor Christopher, you've got your hand up?
Yes, many of the points that I was going to make have already been raised, but certainly in relation to significant risks. I always think the word block is an unfortunate word, but clearly there's the issue of children's services and the high needs block. But I would welcome comments from the Section 151 officer, not just about that, but also the pressure on adult services and all the other issues associated with education that I started talking about in terms of the delivery of children's services at a time when there's a great concern about falling school rolls, falling school numbers. So I would like to certainly appreciate the Section 151 officers' comments both on children's services again, adult services costs, and also the particular issue of Dorset Council and the possibility of continued falling of school rolls. Thank you.
Can I just ask Councillor Christopher to hold that thought, because we have got a presentation on risk management later on in the agenda. This is really to look at the audit governance rather than to delve into those top risks. I think that's appropriate to do that at that point in the meeting, if you don't mind. Would you be okay with that?
Yes, merely to state that clearly this is a question raised, not a statement, and it's a question revolving around a series of risks which go beyond perhaps what is stated there.
Mr. Eyre, did you want to come back on that briefly before we...
I haven't really got any further comments myself. Mr. Dunn, were you going to answer that question at this point or not yet?
I'll come back.
Come back.
Risk. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if we can come back under the risk item, please, Chair.
Yep, so we will look into that a bit later when we come to the risk item. But in terms of the annual governance statement, I'm looking at members, are we content that that is improvement, but there needs to be some work done on the risk side? Councillor Batstone.
Thank you, Chairman. I would agree that it's improving, having digested these over a long period of time. That's one of the more attractive ones. But like you, I was trying to make sense of the 82% and kind of gave up on that one. But on the whole, it's a more readable document than perhaps we've had in the past. And that's not a criticism of the officers, that's just the way it was in the past.
Certainly, the training I've done in the LGA, this document should be for the general public to pick up. When the chance of anyone actually doing that, I think, is quite slow. But and the other thing, presentation, we've got some nice pictures of Dorset. What really is that relevant? It's dealing with governance. To me, it's about this building. It's almost like councillors don't exist. It's County Hall should be on the front of that, I believe, and a bit, people, pictures of people, I think, but that's just maybe just fine tuning it. I don't know. It's just some thoughts, but anyway, I think we'll take that away and work on that a bit further. But yeah, good stuff so far. Okay. Okay. The next point is item 7, isn't it? Yeah. From Mr. House, the Deloitte report, the update report to the Audit and Governance Committee on the 21-22 audit. Mr. House, you wish to take us through that, please? He's virtually.
Good morning, committee. Thank you, Chairman, for the invitation to present this report. I'll keep it brief. This is an update on the progress of the audit this year. To date, it's covering the 2021-22 audit. As you're aware from various discussions we've had in the past, we are running behind on the audits, as are audits across the country. We've made good progress on the 21-22 audit as set out on the third page of the report, covering each of the individual significant risks like management override and completeness and accuracy of accrued expenditure. We note there, in terms of property valuations, we were waiting responses from the valuer Bruton Knowles. We've now had those. We've gone back with some supplementaries, as is the way with audit, and we're waiting for responses to those. Otherwise, as I say, the audit is progressing well. You will note there a slight update to the valuation of the pension fund liability. Because we're auditing somewhat later than normal, there's additional information available on membership numbers. Generally, the pension fund liability is based on estimated changes in pensioner numbers based on cash flows, but because a triennial valuation has been completed, we have some more actual numbers being used, and that has resulted in a change in the liability. Members will be aware that quite often small changes in assumptions make big changes in this liability number. So whilst it's material in terms of the accounts, it's not a huge change in terms of the overall pension fund liability. We're really in this phase of just a few final queries being resolved and then into the review phase, so as we can conclude this audit on a much more timely basis than previous ones and start to get back on track. Nothing more to add, but happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. House. Are there any members, questions from members? Councillor Batstone.
Yes, Chairman, you may recall that I came to your committee late following a reshuffle, and I inherited the presumption that across the country audit was late. I've missed out on the explanation of, and this isn't about us, it's about the whole principle. What happened countrywide that audit was late in so many local authorities? That's the idiot question of the day, sir.
How long have you got? There are numerous. Do you want to briefly go through some of those points, which is around lack of auditors, I believe, problems with valuations of property assets, intangible assets, etc. But
property valuations were an issue with our own organisation as we came together, but not every local authority was in that position. So what was happening countrywide that caused so many local authorities to be behindhand?
Mr. House, do you wish to come back?
I'll try and help, Chair, if I may. So there were a number of issues, as you've said. One was a huge issue around infrastructure assets and the valuation of those. Some queries were raised in terms of the way in which infrastructure was being valued and included in the accounts. There was a lot of technical debate around how that should happen. So that was a significant delay. There is and there remains a shortage of people with the qualifications and skills to undertake local authority audit, and that has had a huge impact on both auditor capacity as well as council capacities to answer auditors' queries, because we're all really sort of looking at the same people with those skills. So there are lots of factors that are at play, which has meant that a huge number of audits are delayed, and you will see in our report, and has been mentioned before, that the government, alongside the Financial Reporting Council and the National Audit Office, have proposed a backstop date of the 30th of September in a consultation. At that point in time, if an audit is not complete, then the opinion will be disclaimed, which basically is a form of opinion which says we can't give an opinion, and everybody will move on. The idea being that as soon as possible, auditors get back to giving assurance on the current financial statements rather than historical ones like the ones we're reporting on today. That will require legislation to pass through Parliament, and there is a meeting this Thursday which I will be attending of the local auditors, the local auditors accounting group, which will consider an update on what is happening. It's a single agenda item. I suspect there may be some change to the consultation, but I don't know at this point in time.
So thank you for that. I mean, I suppose the question, you mentioned that good progress has been made. It's something we hear constantly, but we haven't heard your confidence of meeting that backstop date. I suppose that's what members would like to know, please.
Yeah, so we're confident we'll hit that for the audit that I'm reporting on here, 21-22. 22-23 is much more challenging on that timeline. I'm in discussions with the Section 151 officer around how we might do that. He has expressed a very strong desire to not miss that deadline and that we get the account signed off by that date. And we are working to look at how we might do that. The meeting on Thursday may give me more clarity in terms of the exact timeline we're working to and what will be required, and that will help us finalise plans. But we are very much aware of the Council's incredibly strong desire not to have a disclaimed opinion, and therefore, see it as one of our priorities.
That's good to hear. We're waiting in expectation. Mr. Roach, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. House, for the update. So at the last meeting, there was a report that you presented that had a number of identified control deficiencies as part of your work. There were about 21 different deficiencies across property valuations, debtors, income, expenditure, provisions, journals, etc., etc. I think there were 6 IT ones in particular. And I asked about, well, what's the status of those, because they were raised quite some time ago. And you mentioned that you follow up as part of your audit work to ensure that those control deficiencies have been addressed or that they've been accepted as a risk that management are going to accept. There was nothing in your update about those, though, including any progress on those or work on those. So I just wondered what's happening with those. Are those part of this plan of work now, or are they part of another plan of work later? Thank you.
Mr. House?
Yes, they will be reported as part of the ISA 260, the sort of final report on the audit that brings together all of our work on the 21-22 audit. So we will report an update on those. We've undertaken most of the work. Some of them have been addressed, some is ongoing, but we will report that formally as we come to the end of the year audit report, which will be probably our next report to committee.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no more questions, Councillor Christopher.
The previous speaker on screen will have grown up with an understanding of the statement of accounting practice on the auditing of post-balance sheet events. Now, clearly, the auditing of post-balance sheet events is even more extensive when you're actually auditing a set of accounts that's more than 2 years owed. And it is very problematic when we start talking about value for money for Dorset ratepayers, etc., when we have a position where the accounts that are going to be audited are now more than 2 years owed. And I do appreciate the difficulties involved. And to put this into a context, if only we could get to a situation, for instance, with it could have been a situation with the 2022 accounts, if those figures had come forward and been audited within 6 months, then all of that could have been resolved before the autumn budget of 2022, which cast the whole world into turmoil. So we're left in a position where people must be wondering, what is the value of these accounts when they are so much out of date? And this is the great problem when councils have a great number of assets. And I can only reflect on what's going on in Cornwall at this time. So the question is not so much about the lack of qualified auditors, but the pressure that needs to be applied to actually have appropriate valuations in an uncertain world. That is the great challenge.
Thank you for that. I think we all agree with those sentiments, I would imagine. I don't know if any officer wishes to come back on that regarding asset valuation. I think we're all in agreement, really. And they are issues, obviously, that have been discussed extensively around the infrastructure asset valuations previously, but take your point. Okay, next item on the agenda. Yes, thank you. Mr. House, thank you very much for your participation in that item. You're welcome to stay or leave if you so wish. Next item on the to receive is the various swap papers. The first one being the Internal Audit Annual Opinion Report 23-24. And we've got Angie Hooper and Sally White from Swap with us to present. Sorry, Internal Audit Annual Opinion, yes. Yes. Report Internal Audit Activity, first one. Yeah, getting ahead of myself yet again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Angie Hooper, Principal Auditor, Swap Internal Audit Services. Yes, so we are bringing 3 reports to the committee today. There's our Internal Audit Activity Report, our Annual Opinion Report 23-24, and the Approach to Audit Planning 24-25. Starting with the Progress Report. This is shortened because of the information contained in the Annual Opinion Report. We have issued 2 limited assurance opinions since our last report, Children with a Disability and the RMM SCW framework, and the one-page reports are included in your pack. Actions have been agreed and we will follow these up in our normal way. Following up on the significant corporate risks, for the response to climate emergency, all 3 actions which were due at the end of April have already been completed and work is well underway to implement the remaining actions, and we commend the team for the level of work undertaken. Premises health and safety, whilst work is progressing on all outstanding actions, there is still some way to go before we can close these off. Chair, shall I pause there and allow members to ask questions on this report?
Absolutely. Do we have any questions? We've got my Vice Chair, then Mr Roach.
Councillor Susan Cockin. Thanks, Angie. Yes, it was on page 3, the children with disability. It was just a great concern. I just wanted reassurance that we do have the right processes in place for. It's not fully accurate on the. Was it? I can't even find it now. Sorry, I've got my thing on. It was the invoicing from the agreed hours that the care hours and the hours that the provider had invoiced for. I know local authorities have suffered significant fraud on these things. I was watching a programme the other day and there was very strong evidence that a lot of fraud had been committed. I'm not saying that they have, but I just want assurance that. Sorry, I just wanted assurance that that we have got this controlled and a new processes in place and it has been implemented. And then there was just another one about the reviews and that they're not being done in a timely way as well. So it was the reviews as well. But the first question was about the hours.
Thank you. Yes, with regards to, we didn't find any fraud at all during our testing, and we do know that the service are implementing a new process in terms of checking the invoices back with the care, the hours that have been delivered. But I do also know that the corporate director is here, so he might be able to give you some more detail in that. I don't know if you need any further assurance in that.
It was really that surely these care providers are on our framework, and if they're not actually recording the hours correctly, is there actions being taken against these care providers who are not actually recording the hours properly? Because it's not fair on the person that's receiving the care, but also the person who's delivering the care, and then also on our council taxpayers if these care providers are being overpaid.
Mr Dempsey, wants to come back on that?
Hello. Thank you, Chair. My name is Paul Dempsey. I'm Corporate Director for Care and Protection, and the Children with Disabilities Service falls under my responsibility. I would like to offer reassurance that all of the actions that were recommended from the audit have been completed. We just supplied some further evidence of that this morning. So our processes have been tightened up. Wherever a provider sends an invoice and it doesn't match with the initial expression of interest for a service and the amount of service or hours to be provided and paid for, the service is going back to the provider and challenging that, and also discussing with the social worker whether the need has changed, either up or down. So there is a tighter process in place. As Angela said, there wasn't any evidence of fraud or overpayments found. There were some recording issues, but we do investigate and challenge each occasion where the invoice doesn't match up with what was initially agreed and recorded. Need does change sometimes, and where need does change, we have a process in place whereby we agree that a need has changed and we'll offer or we'll purchase an additional service to meet that increased need, and that is signed off by our service manager for the service.
You happy with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. A question from Mr Roach, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Actually, just following up on that theme that you raised there, so you identify in this Children with Disabilities Audit this potential issue around sort of contracting or agreeing hours and then the invoicing that's provided. I remember one of the control deficiencies that was raised in the external audit that we just talked about was about a incorrect matching process between purchase order and invoice. And then there's something in your other audit about, I'll just remember the acronym you used, the RMMSCW audit, which also identifies an issue around sort of producing estimates against which work can be charged. And the question, so there's 3 examples there of where there's some sort of arrangement or agreement of work to be done, but the invoicing doesn't necessarily kind of match as expected. And the question I have for you is there any analytics or ability that you have to look across your findings that you've done in internal audit to see if there's a more general theme there around the control of setting out a contract of agreement or a purchase order or an agreement of work versus the cost that comes in, so that we can be fully satisfied that they do indeed match up. Is there any analytics or any work you can do to sort of look at that theme across your findings? Thank you.
Mr. Dempsey, do you wish to come back to that, or sorry, who?
I think that's probably a question for us as internal auditors. And yes, we do, wherever possible, try to do data analytics. We've certainly done some quite extensive analytics around duplicate payments through the council's SAP system with some very successful results. And as a result, the council have now implemented some software that is identifying for themselves their own duplicate payments. In terms of commitments versus payments, that is slightly more difficult because it requires commitments to be recorded in a system to then be compared against payments, which is a potential in the children's care recording system. It's something we could potentially look at. And we are always very keen to do data analytics around, wherever data is available. But sometimes getting hold of the data can be slightly problematic. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you for that. I was actually asking whether there's even something simpler than that, which is just looking across all the findings that you raise to see if there is a theme building in this commitment versus payment.
Yes, no, I understand, sorry. Yes, absolutely. That is something that we would do in terms of looking at sort of root cause analysis. Where possible, we would look for themes that are emerging from our work. We regularly sort of meet as a team. We would talk about our findings, and those kinds of themes would potentially emerge. And at that point, we may sort of be able to look at what the root cause of a particular issue may be.
So can we conclude then, if you do that analysis anyway, can we conclude that because you haven't raised that as a theme, you've not seen that as a theme across your findings?
I think it's something that is probably emerging at the moment because obviously it is, it's become apparent in the 2 limited assurance opinions that we have just issued, recorded in this latest report. So yeah, it is something that we would need to have a look at in terms of, what is causing this issue.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I do have another question, if I may, which is on the update on premises-related health and safety. So in the meeting in January, I think I made a request, a comment and request about your priority one actions that you raise, that really once that's negotiated and agreed, because of the significance of priority one actions, they shouldn't really move. They should be done according to the original target date. And if I've read your action tracker correctly, and apologies if I've got this wrong, but I understand on the premises related to health and safety, there was one priority one action and two priority twos. So the priority one action sounds like it has not been met because that was due the end of February or whenever it was, and it's been revised or delayed again. I think at that time I requested that if there is any change in those priority one action dates, that you specifically sort of highlight that to us and help us really understand why it is that that action has not been delivered to the agreed date. So I wonder if I could just clarify if the priority one action has been delayed, and if so, you know, why is that acceptable that that's been delayed? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, there is one priority one action which is still in progress and hasn't yet been fully implemented. And again, the Corporate Director for Assets and Regeneration is here, and he might be able to answer in much more detail than I can in terms of giving you that detail as to why it might not have been fully implemented yet, although we do know that progress is being made.
The Director like to respond?
Chair, Tim Hume, Corporate Director for Assets and Regeneration. If it's in relation to the corporate landlord, is that the one, Mr. H? Yes. We've slightly shifted away from our approach to corporate landlord. I don't think the council really, its current stage, probably not mature enough, I think, for a corporate landlord model, and I think our discussions have taken a slightly different change of direction with our service partners. So I'm happy to provide a fuller update to give members some confidence in that. If I could just come back to the point regarding the RMM framework, and the point that was made earlier on. We've started to do some analysis on the outturn costs in relation to initial estimates, and we are showing evidence where our estimating has been particularly poor. So what we have started to do now is to do things, start to build contingencies into our estimates and adding 5% to our early pricing. And in terms of control of that, start to add some change controls to the sign-off of that contingency budget. But I think it's a fair point that our estimates are not particularly well managed at the moment. And one of the actions dropping out of our audit, again, is to have better training for our staff in that regard.
Thank you. I think Mr. Roach is poised again. Thank you.
I'm sorry, just on this priority one actions that are agreed with internal audit. So I'm not, I guess I'm not confident that we're really applying the level of pressure to get those actions complete. You know, your priority one actions are, I can't remember the language you use, but they are significant issues that need to be resolved as a matter of urgency. I think that the language is something like that. I do think it's important that we have proper visibility and scrutiny of those actions that are not addressed in the timetables that are given. And I would ask again that internal audit facilitate the process to enable us to truly understand what the action was, what the original dates were, why it's acceptable to delay, and what risk mitigation has been put in place whilst that delay is in place, because the risk still exists. So maybe there's some interim mitigation that could be done, or I mean, I don't know. But I would request that internal audit facilitate the process to enable us to really pay attention to those things. Thank you.
Mr. Hume, you wish to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and I would just try to give some assurance, particularly three areas. We are making good progress in terms of corporate landlord. We've come away from using that term. It's been quite an evocative term internally, quite a controlling term, and we're rather using the term now effective property services. So in the case of housing, for example, we've got a much closer working relationship to reduce the void management. It was well up above 50, 60, 70 days in some cases. Now with closer working, we're reducing that to 20 working days where our housing voids occur. With children now, we're aligning our assets against corporate priorities for them and the same approach with our care facilities. So we are making good progress, but in terms of the overall approach to corporate landlord, I think there's been a slight shift, and as I say, I'm happy to give an update on where we're at with that.
Mr. Roach is nodding there. That was particular concern. Slight concern. That was a big thing, taking the corporate landlord model, and if we're going to something that is perhaps less onerous, how's that decision being made, and does that leave any more vulnerabilities or just let us off the hook a bit more? As is pointed out in the reports, unfortunately, there is still outstanding proposed, this has been delayed and delayed to various committees. So I think future audit committees need to have, wherever, as Mr. Roach, I think, that framework of accountability, people coming back to say why that objective is not being made and they're come briefed specifically for that, and it's the same applies to risks when risks are not being mitigated for whatever reason. But I have a point, but I'll come see Mr. Christopher's. Councillor Christopher, you got a point.
Yes, my question revolves around children with a disability, and I have a reputation for asking difficult questions. I do apologise about asking difficult questions at a politically sensitive time. And that question revolves around inequality of provision across the county of Dorset, from one area to another, from place to place, in relation to children with a disability, or indeed whether there's an equality, or indeed a perceived inequality about variation of provision depending on where people live. Would it be possible for officers to comment on possible reputational damage for Dorset Council, where there is perhaps a perceived inequality across the county of Dorset in connection with the provision of facilities for children with a disability? And I invite an answer from officers concerned. Thank you.
I guess, Mr. Dempsey, put you on the spot. Are you able to offer an opinion on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure exactly of the inequality of provision that the member refers to. I would say, wouldn't I, in children's services, that we strive to offer equality of provision across our area for all children with disability. The focus of the audit that we've heard about today in relation to children with disability has been about support services for children with disabilities and their families. Those support services include access to short breaks, both overnight short break provision and daycare short break provision, and also additional outreach support to families by direct provision of services and skilled staff, and also through direct payment. There is a central short breaks panel chaired by one of our service managers that considers requests for resources such as those I've just described. Those decisions are made centrally for children wherever, going through the same process wherever they live, in Dorset. We have recently opened a new overnight short break provision, Hayswood Short Breaks Children's Home, which is in the east of Dorset. So I would agree that we don't have that facility, an in-house short breaks provision overnight dotted around the county, but we do have other opportunities for children to access overnight short breaks, including in independent sector provision. That's what I can say about the provision we've talked about today in relation to children with disability and services we provide. But
thank you. The specific point that I was going to make, and forgive me because I'm a school governor in West Dorset, as well as the Dorset Councillor for the Marshwood Vale, and there is a particular concern about lack of development of buildings and facilities in the West Dorset area, and that is the basis of my question about inequality and perceived inequality of spend for the benefit of people in West Dorset. Thank you.
I think that's a really good point, Mr. Dempsey. I mean, are we spending evenly across the rural areas as much as the urban areas, perhaps?
forgive me, I would have to spend some further time exploring the spend per locality. We do have locality services. Our children with disability teams link in to our locality provision. We are developing our family hubs dotted around all of our localities. So over the next 9 months, you will see more buildings and family hub provision dotted around Dorset, from which the Children's Disability Service can provide services to children and families in those communities. We're always looking to improve the services that we give to all our families, including those children with disabilities, and I will look at services in the West. But as I say, family hubs coming on board in all areas over the next 9 months.
Thank you, and I look forward to continuing the discussion.
Thank you. I have observations really around the repairs, maintenance, minor, small capital works. This is one of the most serious reports I've seen come in 5 years, actually. I mean, it really disturbs me that we can't actually say whether there's no risk being found, no risk of fraud. The reason we can't say that is because we really don't know that the information is so weak that we can't actually say. I mean, I did ask Mr. Dunn to give us some indication or give me some indication prior what the value of the works flown through these sort of minor works are, because that will give us a scale of how worried we should be, you know, if we're talking 500,000 or we're talking 10 million or 20 million. That will give us an indication of perhaps the priority. But this, as you can see, you know, it's almost on the red, isn't it? That we don't know what we'll value. How can we, you know, we say, people keep telling us, you know, we're okay for value for money. How can we measure value for money when we don't know what we're getting, when our estimates are poor? Are we being overcharged? Are we being charged for things we haven't actually requested, or are they putting more stuff on it? We don't know because the records are so poor. That's what this audit is telling me. So I am really concerned about this, and the actions have really got to get a grip on it. You know, why has any action? You know, is any officers been failing here? You know, if this was a private company, I'm sure all heads would have rolled, wouldn't they? I don't know. So I guess Mr. Hume to come back on that, please.
Chair, would you like me to comment? Thank you. Just a bit of background for members. The RMM SCW framework is a framework against which the council procures its local repairs and maintenance through local contractors. We were aware in the year I've been here that there were some weaknesses, and we commissioned the report in partnership with the SWAP team. This was a framework that was in place prior to LGR and has been rolled out across the assets now. In the past year, there's been some changing legislation, and what we're finding is a lot of the small local contractors that employ maybe 1 to 5 do not have the capacity or training or expertise to do some of the things that we wish to do, particularly around asbestos at work and management plans and responding to out of hours. So there are some historical issues there. The actions that, 7 or 8 actions that we've agreed include training for staff and reviewing authorisation levels and better management oversight and stronger contract management. We've already put in place a new cost manager who now will review all works estimates and benchmark those against standard national rates that contractors are applying, and then monitoring those works through as those come to fruition. And we're also going out now to create a new tender, to create a new framework in partnership with procurement. I think we've reached the conclusion that the framework in its current form is not really fit for purpose. The notion of employing local contractors is great, but I think there's something about horses for courses, and when we're expecting local contractors to respond to a 4-hour call out perhaps from a children's residential home or one of our residential homes in Care Dorset or housing, they do not have the capacity and often do not respond. So we are, over the course of the next couple of months with procurement, revisiting the framework to come up with a new framework which is fit for purpose and meets our needs. And in accordance with that, there'll be better training for staff. As I say, we're reviewing the authorisation levels, schemes of delegation, and we're lowering those to restrict the ability for officers locally to sign off works at a value.
Some assurance there. I mean, I hope that, appraisals for staff will include a clear objective about, managing those contracts, because I think that's really key. And I think this is something that's going to have to come back to audit until we feel in a comfortable space. I wonder if Mr. Dunn or any of your colleagues are able to comment on what the value of works flowing through these contracts is, or anyone.
Chair, our revenue budget is about £3 million per annum. We use those predominantly for condition surveys and compliance surveys. The capital works broadly across the financial year is about £6 million. And as I say, that is controlled through meetings with local officers in terms of where it's being spent. And as I say, we are reducing the signing limits at the moment with the new executive director in place as under the scheme of delegation.
Thank you. So we're probably around about 1% or something of the total budget for the council. So it's not insignificant, but it's perhaps a bit less than that, but it's still something we want to get right. It's at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money, isn't it? And we need to improve on that. But thank you for your candid report. Thank you. Okay, if there's no more questions on that, I shall move to the next swap item, which is the Internal Annual Opinion Report 23-24, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the Annual Opinion Report 2023-24. In summary, we're providing a reasonable audit opinion. We have undertaken some work across each of the Council's corporate risk themes. We have issued 10 limited assurance opinions, with none of these as a significant corporate risk. The process of follow-up actions has continued, however, numbers of outstanding overdue actions has increased. So the annual report supports the Council's annual governance statement. We have considered the balance of the 2023-24 audit work and are able to offer a reasonable assurance opinion in respect of the areas reviewed during the year, as most were found to be adequately controlled and risks generally well managed. However, whilst some areas require the introduction or improvement of internal controls, the approach to implementation of audit actions has been part of the consideration in forming this opinion. During the year, 10 limited assurance opinions have been reported to the committee. In addition, we have continued to monitor and report back to the committee on the 2 significant corporate risks that were identified in 22 to 23, and whilst these risks have not yet been adequately mitigated, work continues to implement the actions. Figure 1 on page 69 of your pack shows that we've provided coverage against all the Council's risk themes across the year. Moving to implementation of actions. So the number of overdue priority 1 and 2 actions has increased over the year, peaking at 30 in November, but are now decreasing, which is good to see, and currently standing at 23. Factors contributing to this increase are that short timescales are being set in some instances, and also that we have given 10 limited assurance opinions during the year, which has increased the actual numbers of agreed actions in total. We continue to work with our contacts in the directorates to close off actions promptly, and we are aware that this is also being monitored on the senior leadership team's performance dashboard. On a positive note, for the 3rd year running, there were no audit actions that were risk accepted. Table 1 on page 71 of your pack shows the summary of audit opinions across the year, and the Council's willingness and openness to identify areas for review naturally results in a larger number of limited opinions. And Table 2 shows that almost 3/4 of our work has been either assurance or continuous assurance work. We continue to increase the areas for CIFAS and have also undertaken a wide range of data analytics, surveys and benchmarking across the year. And the full schedule of our work for 2023 to 24 is included at the end of this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that is very self-explanatory and an awful lot of work that has gone on. I think it is pleasing that there is a culture of bringing forward by officers areas, I think, and you come here and get a bit of a kicking, but I think it's a good practice that there is that culture. We appreciate that. That is really important, because the worst thing is that people hide things under a stone and don't want to, let's try and understand the issues and get them resolved. But I think those actions do need to be followed up, and that's the problem. If we get too many, that they're going to start drifting, really. Are there any questions from members? Not seeing any. Okay, thank you very much. So we move on to item 10, the approach to internal audit for 24-25. Swap again.
Thank you, Chair. Sally White, Swap Internal Audit Services. This paper highlights our intention to continue to plan our audit work in the same way as we have for the past 3 years. So whilst we're not presenting a traditional audit plan as such, our live schedule of work is available to senior officers and committee members all year round. You can use the link, which is detailed on page 86 of the report pack, to actually access that system. Working with a rolling plan as we do provides the flexibility to ensure that our work is focused on the organisation's key risks and also aligns to the Council's aims and objectives. This ensures that SWAP are auditing the right things at the right time. It's the responsibility of senior management and the committee to review this schedule of work, which, as I say, can be accessed at any time through our audit board system, to ensure that our work, both completed and programmed, contains appropriate coverage of key risk areas. We would normally bring our audit charter to the committee at this time of year for committee approval. However, there has been a significant change to the internal auditing standards. They've been released only recently, and we will be bringing a combined mandate and charter document as soon as we can for committee approval. We are hoping that this will be the July meeting. However, in the meantime, we will continue working with the current charter. Page 87 of the agenda pack contains details of the financial resources that we will be working with in this new financial year, which is agreed between the Section 151 officer, the service manager for assurance, and ourselves at SWAP. It's good to report that the budget is remaining stable for the forthcoming year. Moving on to quality assurance, external quality assurance. A requirement of the previous and also the new professional standards is that SWAP is subject to an external quality assurance known as an EQA at least every 5 years. The last inspection took place in March 2020, so we will have to be externally assessed by March next year. SWAP's currently considering when it will undertake the next inspection, bearing in mind the need to comply with the new global internal audit standards by 2025. We will keep the committee updated on this. That's the key highlights of the report, but happy to answer any questions that members might have.
Thank you very much for that. Did you have any idea what the changes to charter, the new charter may bring? Are they sort of technical things, or are they something that's going to have a real impact on this committee?
No, we don't anticipate there being significant changes to the charter. The key change is our need to have a mandate which will explain the purpose and objectives of internal audit, and we would anticipate that forming a part of a subsection of the charter. But as I say, we are waiting further guidance on that. Once we have that, we'll be able to prepare that document and bring it to the committee for approval. But no, I don't see there being significant changes in that document.
Thank you. Are members happy to note that report? Oh no, Mr. Roach, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions on the rolling plan, your sort of forward rolling plan of work, and how some of the elements relate to the extreme risks that we've been talking about already. So one is the high needs block. There's an audit called high needs block expenditure, I think, which the commentary says that there's been some discussion and it's going to be deferred until the end of 2024. And I guess my question is, given the high needs block is an extreme risk, is it wise to do that deferral? I know there might be some things going on, but is it wise to defer that to the end of the year? That's question one. Question two is, we also have an extreme risk around the risk of cyber attack, and the management of vulnerabilities is a key component of that risk. And in your plan, you've got information technology vulnerability management as a lower priority, and yet as part of an extreme risk, and that seems incongruous to me. So I wonder if you could just help us understand those two items, please. Thank you.
You happy to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you. With regards to the monitoring of the high needs block, yes, we are in conversation with our colleagues in finance with regards to the sort of position of that. So I don't know if the Section 151 officer wants to comment on the timing of that, but I know that it's to do with the plan and how that's they're liaising with the Department for Education on that one. And also with regards to the cyber, some of the ICT work that we've got, which is a higher priority, which is information management with Microsoft 365 and the implementation of, I'm not very technical, but with the implementation of the new sort of updated Microsoft 365 software, that's some work that we're going to do quite soon, which I understand will help to help with those cybersecurity controls in place. So I don't know, yeah, if the Section 151 officer wants to comment on the high needs block.
Mr. Dunn?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I commented on the high needs block last time and mentioned that we're renegotiating our current arrangements with the Department for Education. So I guess there's two issues from an audit perspective. There's one is we've got a plan, or we're negotiating a plan, negotiating an agreement, so it would be premature for audit to be looking at that, whether the plan's accurate and being delivered. I think there's a separate issue that you're raising around, for example, are the transactions appropriate going through? And I think that It's a separate audit issue, and the timing and the flexibility of that we can adjust as part of our routine prioritisation. But I think it'd be premature to review a plan that we haven't finalised, but fine to audit the transactions to give us the assurance around, as we were referring earlier, as well. Thank you.
Mr. Roach, you happy with that, or we wish to come back?
I am. That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm looking around, no further questions. Okay, thank you very much for those really detailed reports and appraisal of where we are. So I think that's useful in looking forward. Thank you. So next item on the agenda is the risk management updates. We have a report, Mr. Swain, I believe you're going to take us through that briefly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Swain. I'm Dorset Council's Risk Management and Reporting Officer, working within the Business Intelligence and Performance team, led by Dr. David Bonner. This is my first opportunity to deliver the quarterly risk management update to this committee following my appointment in December and subsequent handover of risk to Business Intelligence and Performance from the Assurance team, led by Mark Eyre. The quarterly risk management report provides an update on Dorset Council's risks, which are rated extreme by risk owners, of which there are 3 as detailed. And risk owners achieve their risk rating using a 5x5 scoring matrix aligned to the risk's impact and likelihood. And this methodology is detailed in the paper submitted. It's my understanding that prior to my appointment, Dorset Council had been without a dedicated risk function for around 6 months, and at the time of the last Audit and Governance Committee on the 15th of January, the overall level of overdue risks was at 59%. I'm pleased to confirm that at the point of authoring the report submitted to this committee, that there is a 90% level of compliance, or 10% overdue, in risk register updates, and this has been achieved through collective engagement with risk owners, risk champions, business partners, and myself. Given the level of compliance, my attention is now turning towards targeted chasing of overdue risks with offers of support and coaching where needed to attempt to further improve the levels of compliance shown today. I'm aware, however, that compliance is only part of the story, and the quality of the information detailed within the risk reporting is paramount in allowing decision makers and relevant stakeholders to make informed decisions. Therefore, following my recent attendance of industry conferences and training with colleagues in the Business Intelligence and Performance team, I'm taking the opportunity to share best practice with risk owners on the framework in identifying, documenting and managing their risks, in addition to attending scrutiny committee pre-meets to look at the current portfolio of risks, including those extreme and high and worsening. It's my aspiration that as we align risk with performance, and utilise the support of the Business Intelligence and Performance business partners and wider colleagues, that enterprise risk management will become more established and robust within the Council, supporting the delivery of its strategic objectives now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Roach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for that update. And it does appear that progress has been made since the January meeting. The Power BI dashboard that I've recently managed to look at actually I think is really good and useful for transparency and visibility. What it does allow you to do, though, is to look at various different slices of the data. And whilst I understand that overall the percentage of overdue reviews have reduced, if you actually look at the high risks, there's still a significant proportion which look overdue. So for place, we've got 30 high risks, of which 60% are overdue. For corporate development, we have 21 high risks, of which 62% are overdue. And for children's services, I believe there's 29% overdue. So those numbers don't sound as encouraging as the headline that you just presented. And I think I mentioned last time, but I'll reiterate that in looking at risk management, I think it's critically important that we really look at it in a prioritised way, because there's so many risks to manage. And really getting on top of those extreme and high risks are the most important things to do. And yet, when we look at the data of overdue reviews, it looks like the high risks are sadly lacking. So I guess my request is that, you know, if the Audit and Governance Committee is really supposed to be looking at framework of risk management, I think that was the tee up in the document, then I think the framework should be adjusted to make sure that there's a real prioritization on the extreme and high risks and getting those under control, getting the actions agreed, getting those driven down to the target risk profile that we need. And with some of the lower priority risks, yes, it's great that we're making progress there, but that's not where the priority should lie. Thank you.
Do you wish to come back on that, Mr. Swain? Or Mr. Bonner?
Thank you very much. David Bonner, Service Manager for Business Intelligence and Performance. I think the member makes an excellent point, actually. Whilst we have climbed a minor mountain since Chris joined us in December, getting up to that 90% compliance rate, you are correct that we do have a number of high risks that currently are overdue review. We have a team of dedicated business partners that are now joining this work up as part of our performance framework. So Chris has been attending monthly meetings with directorates to look at the high risks, and as part of a process of overall review, we're actually looking at those risks to make sure they're phrased correctly, fit for purpose, well managed, and also scored appropriately. So it's part of a wider approach to look at our risk framework.
Are you happy with that answer?
Yes, I'll just reiterate, I think prioritization is critical for this type of management.
Thank you. My comments were really around the same thing. It's obviously also it's the quality of those reviews as well. Just saying you've had a review and ticking a box. We need to know that they've been really worked on. So I did delve into some of those risks just to sort of do a sense check myself. And I think one of the adults social care ones, 723, you know, the mitigation, there isn't a mitigation. The mitigation is to go away and think about how to have a mitigation, you know, and that's one of our high, you know, really big impact risks. It's for scrutiny to delve into and to really get into those weeds, but, you know, that's about the quality. So anyone who hasn't got a mitigation, or the mitigation says we're going to go away and have a team think about it, is not really managing that risk. You know, that's okay for a quick, when you first raise that risk, but this risk has been on there, you know, it was last reviewed in January, so I assume it's been on there previously. It doesn't actually say when it was raised. And I guess there are others like that. So I know it's an awful lot of work, and you're going to have to get into that, and it's going to take time. But it's just about improving that and really getting into the weeds of that. And people feel that, you know, that it's an irritating, a bit of a noise to do it, but they're just going to have to do it because you're going to be breathing down their necks, and we're going to be asking them to come to this committee to explain why there is no mitigation, and scrutinies will be all over it, I hope. So that's just a general observation, really. But are we happy to note that, those top risks? Thank you. Mr. Dunn, you wish to come back.
I'm wondering if now would be a good time for me to respond to Councillor Christopher's question around financial risk. Would that be appropriate? So Councillor Christopher asked about overall financial risk, and then in particular for my comments on children's services, adults, and education budgets. So I think just contextually, you will have seen in the national press that it's a really tough and challenging time for local government finance. Within Dorset Council, we looked at the last audit committee 3 weeks or so ago at our Q3 financial report, which was indicating about a 1% overspend, around about the £3 million overspend mark for last financial year, and we've since clicked over into our new financial year. So we're just putting together the sort of end of year financial statements and expecting it to be around that 1% overspend for last year, which in the context of what's happening across local government in the country, we're seeing that as a reasonable result. In a time when inflation has been really high, unexpectedly high, and then has able to and fortunately has come down, and then pay awards linked to that as well. I think the budget round leading to the budget that full council signed off in February for this new financial year, it was a very tough budget round where we looked for continued efficiencies, and we've got a significant challenge around transformation. So it's not as though we can just stand still. We need to be actively managing and reshaping our services so that we can live within our means. I think from a children's services perspective, Dorset Council is, I would describe as bucking the trend. Spend levels in children's services in Dorset Council are reasonably stable compared to the, we're not experiencing the enormous growth in cost that other local authorities are seeing around the country. And I think that's a tribute to the leadership and the management team in particular of children's services, and that's being recognised nationally. The Pathfinder project that Children's Services are piloting nationally is, I think, a real key factor of why Children's Services are performing so relatively well. So there's that sense of early intervention, there's that join up the partnership working with other statutory agencies in the voluntary sector. And I also think the approach to investment, be it both revenue but capital investment as well, is really paying off. And Paul was describing earlier about the family hubs, for example, as a real opportunity to provide services locally to support our children. So I think children's services are doing particularly well, but that's not to say that the pressures aren't out there. They're being absorbed. Similar story, I would say, from adult services, who over the life of the council have really brought a degree of financial grip and control since the council was formed. Once again, an approach to early intervention, an approach to investment in capacity, and the significant plans over coming years to support sort of stepping down out of hospital. I think one of the challenges is the local health system is under significant financial pressure at the moment. On the other side of things, I would say that our care market, in particular our home care providers, are sort of seeming reasonably stable at the moment post-COVID. So once again, great credit to colleagues in adult services. I think in terms of the financial risk around our education budgets, we've touched on the high needs block, and that's right up there as a significant risk to us financially. I think a couple of other areas I'm actively concerned about, the continued academisation of schools. So I'm not concerned about the policy, it's the financial implications for Dorset Council. So increasingly as schools become academised, the funding flows directly from government to those schools rather than to Dorset Council and then onto the government. I think that's got a financial implication for us in terms of our capacity to support as we get less money and the implications for our overheads. So there's a financial risk around academisation. And then Councillor Christopher mentioned about falling or indeed changing roll numbers. I think we sort of see that the impact locally as roll numbers fall, perhaps in some of our villages, and how that impacts on the sustainability of local schools, particularly small primary small village primary schools and their ability to be sustainable. On the other hand, as population grows in other parts of the county, then we need to be providing additional places. And that links us back round to the high needs block, where our approach to tackling high needs is to increase the capacity in particular. So there's a significant building a series of building projects going on, increasing capacity, and that's a real challenge in terms of delivery. So our the financial risk is impacted by our ability to deliver that capital programme. And then in amongst all of that, one of the areas we looked at our Q3 finance report was the increasing costs of transporting children to school. So that's our mainstream schools, but in particular, children with special educational needs. And our expenditure in that area has gone up significantly. And it comes back to that. If the children don't have to travel so far, it's good for the local child, it's good for the child, and it's good for our transport budget. But we also need to build the extra capacity in the right places, but you also need to have the land, have the facilities, and have the schools that we're extending in those places as well. So a complex picture. So education budgets remain a financial risk to us, but I believe we have a reasonably good plan of how we're tackling that in the medium and long term. Thank you.
Vice Chair, you have a question.
So, Aidan, I just wanted to pick up on that you said about the schools, having the right schools in the right places and everything. Is there any update on the school on Portland on the Osprey Quay? Because that's been designated as a SEND school for children with special needs from 14 to 19, I think, or it might be 11 to 19. But that site has been empty for years, and when I've spoken to our MP, Richard Drax, he's saying it's on the DFE's desk to be signed off, and it must be at the bottom of the pile covered in loads of dust now because it's been there for years, and it's such a waste of a facility. And, you know, in Weymouth and Portland, there's a huge number of children with special educational needs. And they're having to be transported quite far, which, as you just explained, is, you know, cost effective, but it's not good for the child as well. But so I don't know, has Dorset Council got any clout in actually forcing this document to be signed, or is the plans changed? Because it's a waste of the facility and it's so desperately needed within the county.
Thank you. Great question. So Osprey Quay features very prominently in our current safety valve agreement in terms of it is our planning assumption that children will be receiving special educational support in Osprey Quay. In terms of making it deliverable, that is in the hands of the Department for Education. We're very frustrated about the slow progress there, and we are meeting with senior officials this Thursday who are coming down to see us on Thursday, and it's one of the many items that we wish to discuss with them.
Could you just keep us updated, or, you know, especially as a councillor for Portland, on what the progress is? Because local people are really asking a lot of questions about it, and they, you know, what the rumour mill was like. But yeah, it would be good to have some updates on a regular basis, so I'd appreciate that.
I think Mr Dunn is nodding, so that will come back. Before we move on, just a question as to why we have nothing on public health.
So public on, you're referring to the dashboard, presumably. So public health on the risk dashboard is blank because it's zero. They're 0% overdue. I think that's what you're referring to. Okay.
So it's not that they've got no risks, it's just that they've got none of the extreme risks that are overdue, is that what we're saying? Thank you, that's good. So they're obviously doing something differently, aren't they? Or I don't know. That's it. Yeah. So, Stevens.
Chair, thank you. Could I just go back to support Mr Dunn? The delays with Portland haven't been all our making. There's been a bit of a dispute over an existing retaining wall and shared liability going forward. And the DfE have been a bit obstinate in terms of what they might or might not accept as shared liability. We've now, I think, concluded those negotiations, which I think is the preamble and precursors of the meeting that Mr Dunn's having. So the delays have not been all our making, they've been with the DfE, but we have made really good progress in recent months over the shared liability of that wall.
Okay, thank you. We will now move on, thank you for that, to the next item, which is the sexual harassment policy. Who's going to lead on that? Is that Jonathan? Jonathan Mayer.
Good morning, members. I'm Jonathan Mayer. I'm the Director of Legal and Democratic and the Council's Monitoring Officer. So this morning, I think you've been concentrating so far on the other part of the committee's terms of reference, which is around the control environment. So you've been talking about risk, about internal audit, external audit. And what I'm talking to you about concerns the other part of your terms of reference, and that's standards of conduct and how councillors behave and the guidance that we provide around that. So back in January 2023, the council refreshed its approach to sexual harassment and adopted a new policy for staff around sexual harassment. And that policy is where we do a number of things. We set out the council's position on sexual harassment, our zero tolerance approach to that. And we also set out guidance aimed at providing a supporting environment for all staff. So that will include the guidance and support that we provide for colleagues who might have experienced sexual harassment, and also the guidance and support that we provide to colleagues who might witness sexual harassment. So we've got a really clear position on staff. What we've found as we prepare for the councillor induction after the elections in May is that we don't have that equivalent guidance for councillors. And of course, you have a different status. You're not employees. And the legal protections that exist for employees and the duties that are owed to employees don't apply in quite the same way to you as councillors, but it's still important that we have that equivalent policy which sets out expectations around your behaviour as councillors, but also that same practical guidance to you that's given to staff around what to do if you yourselves experience sexual harassment, what you should do if you witness something that you're uncomfortable about. So that's what this guidance aims to do. If I can take you to the risk assessment section, because I think that's where the meat of this sits. We're really high. So we've always been clear that about really high expectations of standards of ethical conduct in the council, but we know from other public sector bodies that the behaviour of a small minority of people can cause a lot of damage, both individually to people and to the reputation of an entire organisation. And I've dropped into the report a quotation from somebody called Alex Johnston. Now, Alex Johnston, she was a former fire chief, and she conducted the independent culture review into Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue. And in that quote I've provided, she talks about the minority of people who have damaged the reputation of that organisation and damaged the reputation of the majority of hardworking, decent people there. But she also talks about those who stand by in a workplace and they know and they observe poor behaviour but don't do anything about it. And she talks about the vital importance of everyone in an organisation, so not just staff but also you as councillors, understanding our personal responsibility, standing up and then challenging poor and inappropriate behaviour. So when we apply that to our own organisation, the gap we've got is around the guidance and the expectations for you as councillors, and that's why we brought this forward now, so that we can seek your endorsement as a committee and then include this as part of induction for the new council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that, and it is a really detailed, informative guidance sort of documents, really. And I'm pleased to see that it also mentions that the complaints process, because it has to be fair, there's always the risk of frivolous or malicious allegations against people. So there is two sides of the coin, and I think that's important to remember. It is very detailed. Do members have any questions? All happy to endorse that. It's really important to get this in place, ready for the new intake, as we say, in a few weeks' time. And people will be coming in from all different backgrounds, no doubt, some of which you've not been in a sort of HR background or used to what we all take for granted in some sectors is not in other sectors, and different cultures coming in. So it's really important to drive that. So are we happy to accept that? Looking around? Yep, okay, thank you very much. We will have a vote on it, yes. Okay, who's, before we vote that? So Vice Chair is proposing, seconder please. Councillor Batstone. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Yes. Okay. Right, item 13. Just get to my agenda. Right, a constitutional update, Mr. Mayor again.
Chairman, thank you. Two items to update you about this morning, where I have used a delegation that I've got in the Constitution to update and amend the Constitution, where there are either where there might be consequential changes as a result of changes to how we work as an organisation, or, for instance, changes to the law. So the two things I'm bringing to you this morning, the first relates to the Appendix 2 to the Officer Scheme of Delegation. And in the Officer Scheme of Delegation, we set out in Appendix 2 a range of employment powers that different tiers of managers have in the organisation. And we've had to make some changes to those arrangements and how employment powers are exercised in relation to different members of staff, because the council has adopted a new vacancy management process. We have a new e-ploy system, it's called, and that brings with it a lot of advantages around digital approval processes for employment decisions, gives us greater consistency and greater control over vacancies. And that's meant that we've had to make some changes to those tiers of managers and who can make different employment decisions. So that's the first one. The second then, also in that officer scheme of delegation, we have a list of people who are called proper officers, who exercise particular, usually statutory roles. And at the beginning of the year, our Caldecott guardian, a colleague in Children's Services, left the council, and we've had to designate as proper officer as the Caldecott guardian, a new officer, and that's colleague Julia Ingram, a corporate director in adult services. And the role of the Caldecott guardian, it's a role that also exists in the NHS. But for us, it's around the safeguards that we have in place for people's personal data. So in our instance, personal social care data. And so Julia will have that particular responsibility as Caldecott guardian, and I've made that change in the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of technical details there, but I guess how can we be assured that those new roles that some people will be taking on, they're properly trained and understand what those roles are, and they're not just going to be signing off things they don't fully understand?
Thank you, Chairman. That's a really good point. And I know that Julia Ingram, the corporate director who's taken this on, she's had her Caldecott guardian training already. And she's also a member of, so I'm what's called the CIRO, the Strategic Information Risk Owner, and we have a Strategic Information Governance Board, and the Caldecott Guardian is a member of that board. And it's really important that she should be part of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on that? Are we happy to note those changes? Thank you. The next item is 14, which is the work agenda for the future audit committees. Are there any items that you think should be on future committees that are not being picked up? Or are you content to accept those? I could see emergency planning report. I think that's something that I can't remember coming to us before, so that would be useful to see, I'm sure. Okay, not singing. Nope. Right. In that case, that is, I believe, unless there's any urgent items to bring to attention. Nope. Okay.
Forgive me, but I do believe this may be the last possible audit and governance meeting. Indeed, it may be the last possible meeting in County Hall for Councillor Pauline Batstone. And I think it would be appropriate if we paid tribute to Pauline and indeed other members of the Audit Committee who are not here today. Would that be appropriate, Chairman?
Thank you for your wonderful service over the years, and for all members who are retiring. Some of us may be retiring without intending to retire, who knows? But interesting times, as we say. But yes, absolutely.
Can I thank you on behalf of those members not here as well? And can I wish all of those who do wish to come back the very best in the forthcoming unpleasantness at the beginning of May. And I shall not totally give up local authority work, in that I'm standing for the Town Council in Stumps and Newton, where I'm, as you are aware, very involved. And I would say that it is now, how many years? I first came into this building in 1967, I think, as a typist, and have had some quite interesting times here ever since. And I will now have been a councillor for 31 years. And continuing thereon after, I hope, depending, as we have an election in Stumps Newton, so anything can happen. But thank you for those kind words, Simon, and for you.
Thank you very much. And great, you know, those years of service, that's amazing, isn't it? 1967, coming into this building. Wow. And it's good to see that there's so many, all the Dorset Council seats are being fought. Unfortunately, it's not the same reflection in parish and town councils, which I think there may be some questions to look at there as to why that is. I have some ideas, but I think perhaps some work needs to be done there for somebody. I don't know who would do that, but DAPTC. Yes, very well fought in some areas. It's Portland, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much. There is no exempt business, no, and as I said, no urgent items. So thank you very much for the meeting. Cheers.